Hello, you're back with the Arm with Opinion blog, and I'm outside today. It's a fine Sunday afternoon, and I'm walking over to the park. Today's topic is going to be on happiness and what makes us happy as individuals. I've lived a long life, and I've had periods of happiness and unhappiness. Actually, my childhood was pretty unhappy, but as I became older, I learned some of the secrets to becoming happy, and I want to share some of them with you. I guess the most important thing that I want to share with you is to don't follow the crowd. Figure out who you are, what you like to do, and do it. You tend to be good at what you do. Too often in America, and it's really, really sad, people chase money first. Particularly those people who come from poorer backgrounds. They tend to feel the need to chase money because that was something that was very important in their younger life. It was absent. And so as a result of that absence, they tend to think that the most important thing they can do is obtain security. My mother was very much like that, and I've met so many other people who think that way. I'm fortunate that I grew up a little bit more secure, though I had times when I didn't have food to eat growing up, but I always worked part-time jobs. Like everybody my age that was similarly situated to me, particularly those people of color, we all worked part-time jobs. A lot of the white kids didn't, but people of color, we all had part-time jobs. So we did not see that as a burden or anything. We saw it as normal. Started the paper out at 12. And what I liked about it was that I could get some of the things that I wanted that made me happy. And those things were in part material, but not really. They were really tools to an end. The first thing I ever bought for myself was a pair of Chuck Taylor's Converse All-Stars, because on the playground, to get any credibility back in those days, to be fly, or whatever you wanted to call it, that's what we called it back in those days, to be fly, you had to have Converse. That was the one, the Chuck Taylor's. The cheap brand was Skips, and Skips became a generic term for any kind of sneakers that were not either Converse All-Stars or Pro Kids. You could get by with Pro Kids, but any other brand was considered to be junk, and the generic name was given to those generic brands of sneakers was Skips. I still remember that well. But what the sneakers, though they're monetary, what they enabled you to do was to play ball. And that's what gave us joy. Playing softball in the Sacred Heart Playground, which was a cement church playground that had the bases paved on the cement. So you had a home plate, first, second, and third base. Right field was very short because there was a yard there. So we had a tall fence, and we played to the left side of the field. So the pitcher would pitch from in between shortstop and third base. So people like me who were lefty would not hit the ball near the right field fence. Though I probably wouldn't have got it over very much anyway, because I was not that good a hitter. But there were plenty of people who could, and occasionally the ball did go over the fence. And there was a big German Shepherd in the yard behind the fence. So everybody was afraid of going into that yard. You remember those things from your childhood. But the happiness was the joy of friendship. And we played games, from season to season. Touch football in the fall and winter. Spring and summer was softball. And eventually it evolved to the team of the blacks against the whites. And it was a rivalry, but it was not what I would call specifically racial, because we had one white guy on our team, Bobby Kurtz, and he was honorary black. He was a Bob Dylan fan. I remember that a lot. He loved Bob Dylan. Wonder whatever happened to Bobby. Bobby was cool. And so, and we would play, but it was jovial. We had an older Italian guy who would keep the peace, and if anybody got out of line, his name was Distanzio. He would come, a short guy, muscular, you lifted weights. He would come around and nobody messed with him because everybody was afraid of him. So he kept the peace among all the young people on the playground, which was a very good thing. And to this day, his name is revered among my friends because he looked out for everybody. He was about doing the right thing. And that is so, so important. That's something that will carry you on through life. And that's one of the keys of being happy. Doing the right thing. My dad says you always know what's right, but you don't always do it. And it reminds me of a scripture in the New Testament, the book of James. He that knoweth to do good and doeth it not, to him it is sin. And that's really a very, very important concept. You know the right thing in almost any situation. You know what's right. The key thing is to do it. And if you constantly do it, that will bring happiness to your life. And that happiness is so important for joy in your life. When you give up a part of yourself to get along or for money, you give up a part of your soul. And of course, we all make compromises. Don't get me wrong. I'm not saying to make compromises. I've made compromises in my life. I did a job that I hated in corporate America for 10 years, working for an electric utility in New York. I mean, I hated it from the first day of training. And I stayed there 10 years. But I look at it as, in retrospect, as a good education for me, because it showed me what corporate America was like, what institutional racism was like. And then we actually were awarded a small token settlement by the company after a discrimination lawsuit was filed against them long after I had left. You learn these things, and they're life lessons. But the discipline that I learned, getting up, going to work every single day, being there on time, doing your job, everything was measured. You had quality control. There was a reasonable expectancy for every task that you were involved in. These type of things taught me discipline, and they taught me joy. Being around people was wonderful. Sitting around after work and hanging out with some of the people that you worked with when you were young, in your 20s. Playing bidwis. That was a big thing. Now when you see people play spades, and to us that was a kid's game. I still think of it as a kid's game. But here in Atlanta, a lot of adults play it, and it amazes me. Because I remember coming down to Lee County, Georgia, outside of Albany in the early 1970s, everybody played bidwis, and they took it seriously. But in many ways, we've seen our culture dumbed down over the years. But that's another story. Learning and constantly growing is another way to be happy. Do not let your career define who you are. I heard one of the saddest things from someone I was talking to last week who happened to say that they think like an accountant, and that's their perspective for looking at the world. That was incredibly sad to me. Yeah, I'm a lawyer. I'm trained in the law. But I would never say that I think like a lawyer. God forbid. I think like John Armwood. I exist a priori to being a lawyer. I exist before that. That was only a small part of my life. I mean, maybe it was bigger than a small part, but it was not a defining part. That's the key. My whole life has defined who I am, not my work. I understand that in work, you're largely a tool of the system that you're working within. And that system is always, I don't care what it is, about reproducing itself. Or as the great legal thinker at Harvard during the 1980s, Duncan Kennedy, called it the reproduction of hierarchy. His book was talking specifically about legal education and the reproduction of hierarchy. But I think that applies to any kind of environment. Any kind of environment that you get involved in, you're going to get involved in working to reproduce a particular hierarchy. You have to define yourself outside of that system within you are working. If you define yourself by it, you're creating a hollowness inside that can't be filled because you have nothing else. And when that disappears, you're constantly trying to recreate what was already there. And that is sad. I know some people may say, well, they're happy doing that. I find that very, very hard to believe, because you're doing things that benefit others more than they benefit you. Enriching your own life. Now, family life, wonderful thing to enrich yourself. But as men, I think we generally have a harder time than women, especially with our male children. Male children in this era, and it may have been like this all the time, tend to not to take the concerns of their male parents very seriously. And I've talked to all my male friends who have sons. Do your sons call you? No. It seems to be a real problem. It's a level of selfishness, which is, I think, much more focused among people of this generation than it was of our generation. And I know people of one generation often criticize the oncoming generation, so I want to be careful not to overstate that. But I know that I had ritualized habits in terms of contacting my father. I never went a week without calling him, or my mother. It was just something that I felt a moral obligation to do. And I know young people do not feel that obligation. They tend to be very self-involved. They don't mean harm by it. They're ignorant of how important it is. As I say, and I tell my own son, my oldest son, what goes around comes around. I told him last week, you're building a karmic debt, because the joy that you receive from your family is best felt, I believe, as you get older. I think when you're young, you don't appreciate it, you take it for granted. When you're a teenager, you're naturally breaking away from it, so you don't want that involvement. So that's something that we have to keep in mind, to keep in memory, that when you're younger, that's a battle. You want to be away from the restrictions that you see that family bring you. So as you get older, into your 20s, 30s, and 40s, you get wrapped up in your own career, in what you're doing. And that's something that is natural, but it's very important that we make time for those people who love us and who we love. Because that, again, is an important part of being happy. The last thing that I want to talk about in terms of being happy is expressing your internal creativity. What do I mean by that? We all have talents. We all have talents. Things that we enjoy doing not because of their economic value, but because we enjoy it just to do it. We do it for free. I love jazz. Anything to do with jazz. It's not about money. I used to produce concerts for free long before I made money doing it, because I liked it. It wasn't important to me. I'm doing this video right now. I'm doing YouTubing. It's not for money. Could I use the money? Yes. Could I use money from this? Yes. Am I making money from it? No. Right now, do I care? Absolutely not. It's not important to me, because the process is what is important. Like jazz pianist Cecil Taylor used to say, in fact, named one of his albums, it's in the brewing luminous. In other words, the joy, the glow comes from working it, comes from learning about it, comes from doing it. Teaching, I found the same kind of joy from. And I come from a long family of teachers. I think I'm like the 4th generation of educator in my family. On the middle school, high school, and college level. And I get a tremendous joy from teaching. I'm to this day volunteering teaching computer skills at the community center, because I like teaching. There's a joy that I get from it that's well beyond economic considerations. Would I like to get paid to teach? Yes. But would I stop teaching just because I didn't get paid for it? No, because it brings me joy. I have a strong belief, and my life has demonstrated this. When you work at things that you enjoy, money will come. It'll find you. If you work hard, continue to better yourself, and do what you need to do to increase your skill level, to increase the quality of what you're doing. That's what's most important. And if you do that, you continue to grow, opportunities will grow and become part of your life. And that's very, very necessary for you to be happy. So we've talked about a number of things which can make you happy in this life. And I hope you found this discussion edifying, enjoyable, as we walk through the park on this Sunday afternoon. For you guys, have a great day.